Hello everybody, Troublemaker here, and I'd like to apologize. Yesterday I was in such a rush, and I don't really know why I was in such a rush. I was in a rush yesterday to actually complete these videos that I really screwed up on quality in a lot of areas. One thing I want to apologize for is getting the names wrong. You know, if you have watched my channel, you would know that happens all the time.
The Mi-224Ds.
The Armée de Terre.
VBs are
helicopter airborne infantry. But, I mean, it's a different language. I'm trying to pronounce them the best I can. And, you know, if it's really offensive to you that I can't speak your language, you should mute the channel. I mean, it's worth noting that English is my second language. And I also have a third, a fourth, fifth, and a sixth language. Which chances are you can't speak either of those anyway. So I'm going to redo this Japanese video because it really got botched very badly. If you want to see the Soviet section, the USSR and whatnot, that's coming up. But I really want to redo this one because this one was just, it was bad. So this is our Japanese section of infantry. And, I mean, cool thing worth noting is that they're actually Japanese. Previous to this, Eugen Systems only had white people in the game, and now they've slightly retextured these people to have Japanese features, and they are very Japanese features indeed. These infantry can be deployed in 3 vehicles of good stain, and the most common will probably be the UH-1H in the future. And moving along, we have ourselves a Mitsubishi CV. And we have a Hachi Nishiki CV. Now, worth noting is that this is a 100-point CV that has 0 armor. And these commands here, these infantry commands, are also 100 points and also 0 armor. In the way it all works right now, it makes more sense to get these units in a Chugatu and unload them than to get this Mitsubishi CV. Because if you have these guys in a town that's closer to your base, they'll be far more guarded from things like artillery and random bombing attacks. Whereas this Mitsubishi CV, just, it will get one-shotted. Moving forward, we have our Shiki CV. Yes, Nanasan Shiki CV. 115 points. It's got a mounted gun right here, which is kind of neat. As far as design choice, it's cool, but in terms of practicality, of course, we don't actually care about our commands being able to fight back. It has a little hatch in the butt here for the commander to enter, but yeah, once again, probably not a vehicle we're actually going to see used in the future. Now here's the Japanese command tank, and as far as the command tank goes, it's actually quite lackluster. It's only got 6 armor, but it's also only 150 points, so the price ends up being right for this particular one. Now, there are tons of better command tanks out there. Probably none as cheap as this, though. I don't know if it'll ever get used, because once again, when you want a command tank, you're willing to invest 200 points into one. You'd never go for the cheap knockoffs. The Japanese are going to have 2 ways of deploying supplies on the battlefield. They have the Chugatu cargo, and they also have the KV-107 Shirasagi. Now, currently the model for this is just wrong. It's wrong, but it's beta, so that's it. You'll notice that the Swedish crowns mark is here. They have that yellow below with the crowns, which is their currency over here. And they also have 4 Vars Macton. So, you know, clearly this is going to be probably modeled after a Swedish unit, because it probably is really close to a Swedish unit. But the skin is wrong, and they'll probably be fixing it. I mean, the idea that this game will launch in a month is a ridiculous one. This will be a summer title, I guarantee you it. Moving on to our infantry section, we have tons of Japanese-only infantry, and they love these 91 Shiki. They have the infrared-style rockets. They're a 2-man squad, very stealthy, so hard to find. Can be deployed in a lot of places. And we're going to see 2 ways of deploying these, one of which is going to be this armored tank here in particular. And I think this decal here is wrong. maybe I'm wrong about this, but this, oh, never mind, I am wrong. Actually, this is a Japanese dragon, which always appears kind of wonky, like a lion. But yes, this is totally a new vehicle as well. 91 Shiki and the Nanasan Shiki. And basically, for most of these, Japan has limited options for deployment. They're going to have this Box 10, which is just a standard 5-point vehicle. And then they're going to have this, Nanasan Shiki, which, has 2 anti-infantry guns, which makes it pretty good in terms of infantry killing power. You can deploy your infantry, and this guy can help join in the fight. Not particularly armored, but, with a little bit of microing backwards from the battlefield, you can keep these guys alive and keep them in the fight. So moving on, we have our Chumat, and they are an AT squad with their good sack loads rockets. It's a pretty high range for an infantry, 2450. It's actually insanely high range. I'm wondering if this will be adjusted a little bit. I'm not sure, but yes. These guys are pretty badass, and note, they do have some facial hair, which is pretty cool as well. Now there's a second way, of course, deploying this, the Nanasan Shiki, which will be our second common vehicle for the Japanese. We have 1 of these Hohei, which are going to be a general purpose infantry. Now there's only 1 of these available. Unless you go for the 1990 squad. This means that if you're going for a Cat C or Cat B deck, you probably won't be able to pick up these guys. But the Hohei 90 are basically the same thing as the regular Hohei in basically every conceivable way. The only difference being that the Hohei 90 get to have a second vehicle. The Hachikyu Shiki, which is, obviously going to be a lot less used because of the fact that it's in the 1990s deck. But it does give more powerful options. It's worth noting there's a auto cannon over here and rockets, so hard to say whether that will be used or not. It's a really, really hard thing for the metagame. Here's our ISCHR. Well, that could be a 1 because Eugen plays this funny game with numbers, and they're a higher quality squad, general purpose infantry squad, and once again, it's hard to say whether they'll get used or not. I mean, yes, they have greater stats overall, but people generally seem to prefer the cheaper infantry. There's also the UH-1H as a secondary way of deploying it, and this one's complete, noted by the red sun on our UH-1H. Yes, very good, Eugen Systems. Now here's our JSDF tank hunters, which are going to be an anti-tank squad, another anti-tank squad. And it's worth noting that when you combine Korea, South Korea, and Japan, you get a nice cohesive squad that has a lot of AT and a lot of AA in their infantry. These guys, have 1 guy with a very small bazooka on his back, much shorter range than the other AT squad, so, I mean, these guys are going to be your close-range tank busters. And they only have 1 real way of deploying, and that's going to be this Nanasan Shiki. Or is that Sam? Really? Nanasam Shiki? No, it's an N. Okay. I am getting paranoid. So we have the Kute, which only have 1 way of deploying, which is going to be this helicopter here. And I'm assuming this is some sort of airborne Japanese infantry of some sort. But they're once again a 20-point infantry, roughly the same value as the other 20-point infantry, the Hohei. So, sorry, they're 10 points, but you have the idea. They're roughly the same value. There is a 1990 variant, obviously, which can be deployed on the ground. Once again, also 20 points, but you get the option of this Box 10, which is a 5-point infantry carrier. We have our Stingers. Now, I think this is probably going to be a temporary name, because Stinger is obviously the name of this SAM rocket here. They might add in Japanese Stinger, I don't know. Maybe they have a Stinger Trooper Division in Japan. I don't really know. There's not much I know about the Japanese Army, because they have a tiny one. But they can also be deployed in these Nanasan Shikis, these Japanese-only vehicles, which, of course, remember, they're actually good. I mean, they have 2 guns, so that's good for 5 points. Moving on to our support section, we're going to have a lot of artillery. And artillery, they're trying to make artillery good again, which whether or not that's a mistake, we will see. The Japanese have tons of artillery. This is the 105 SP. It's got a big giant main gun. It's got a little minigun on the top. It's got a small hatchery to go into its butt. You have to lie down on this vehicle, it appears. And it's a tracked vehicle, so yeah, it's an artillery unit. Here's another one, the 155 SP. We have once again a gun on the top, slightly higher quality artillery gun, slightly higher quality price. This looks like a beacon. Is that really a beacon? Why would you put a beacon on a vehicle like this? Why? So yeah, slightly higher range. It's 19,250. That's almost the entire battlefield. Now we're talking about the big bad boy, 23,800 range. It's got a cool stop backer thing on this, so that when it hits backwards, this thing will, stop it from moving backwards. I wonder if there's an animation to actually, put this down whenever it stops, because that would be cool. It's a very, very long gun. It has no attachments to it, which makes it the preferred of the three variants. It deals higher damage, more explosive damage, AoE damage, and will be a treat on the battlefield compared to the other two variants. I cannot ever see this one or this one getting used by anyone competent. This one, however, seeing as it's a 65-pointer, most likely has a chance of getting used. Looking forward, we have our MSSR, which is kind of an MLRS system. Rocket artillery, that is. Fairly good range for rocket artillery, 14,000, which is, low for artillery, but good for rocket artillery. And it's going to allow you to do a pretty close range spread dispersal on people with a lot of rockets. 30, is a lot of rockets. Once again, artillery is going to be kind of a focus for this, so this might be good. It does have the Browning, which unfortunately affects its cost value, so maybe this one won't show up. Now we have our mortars, and mortars, of course, are always popular. Mortars are your anti-infantry artillery unit, and this one is pretty close range, about 5,000 meters, just out of some really long AT ranges, by about 2,000 meters, that is. So they will be up in the front line. You do have a Browning rifle mounted on the top here. So yeah, not the perfect mortar, but most mortars seem to have a Browning rifle on them anyway, because of how close range they are to the battlefield. It's basically like a little APV with some guns mounted on it. And talking about APVs with guns mounted on it, for the exact same price, the exact literal price, oh sorry, it's actually 15 points more, you get a different mortar with an extra 1,000 meters range, slightly higher damage, but looks roughly the same. Different camo is a big thing to note here. And I think there's an extra light up the front here. No, actually the exact same one. So, yeah. I can imagine this being slightly more popular than this one, just because people like hard-hitting artillery, and you don't buy a lot of them. They're also already an expensive investment in terms of a supply truck, so people usually try and go for higher quality artillery over lower quality. So here's the Kaiyu Hawk, and basically every faction in Wargame Red Dragon has an iHawk on the NATO side, and this one has this really cool turret that looks like a crossbow, and oh, those Japanese in their designs. It looks very future tech, despite it being basically the exact same tech as the Americans. And yes, their rocket is actually slightly different than what the Americans have. It's clearly being optimized for computerization, and pretty good average ranges here for an iHawk. Indeed. We also have this M42AAG. This is going to be your anti-helicopter range weapon. It actually falls just out of range of most helicopters, though, so it's going to be kind of a problematic unit. Might get used more for infantry rushes and doubling over as like oh crap type artillery. It's only 15 points, so literally if it kills like 2 units, it's paid itself off wholeheartedly. Given the fact that it does bonus damage against light units, it could possibly see this unit on the battlefield. Now here's the gun tank. It's a much more potent version of the last unit we were speaking of. It's got the big old radar dish on it, so it has very well corrected radar rounds. It deals ridiculous range against helicopters, 2,800 meters against helicopters and planes, and is also a beast against ground forces. Of course, a 50-point radar-guided twin autocannoned anti-air unit, you're unlikely to actually deploy against infantry. You'll want to sit this guy back a bit so that he can actually deal with the targets you brought him out here for, because he's not cheap enough to throw away. Moving forward, we have the 10 SAM. Yes, the 10 SAM. My bad. There is an M in there apparently. And this is an infrared system. You know, it's got these SAM missiles, which haven't been seeing a lot of in previous games, but here they are. It's got 2 launchers here, so we'll be launching 2 at a time, it appears. And it's got a cool little block that reticulates and pretty good camouflage. Now, it is just a truck, which means that it's also lightly armored, and that's kind of a bad thing. But since it's infrared, it is less likely to die to those dear god anti-radar bombers. So this is our close arrow. The name is indicative of what it does. It's a close range anti-air unit. It's 2275 range against helicopters. That's pretty damn close to helicopter range, and it might come down to who gets the fire first. And it's not going to be particularly good. You know, no real good reload time here, 10 seconds, and that's more than enough time for a helicopter to get a good shot off. But yeah, dual launchers, so they will fire off. Looks like 4 actually, 4 at once. That would be insane if it did that. And you know, it's just a Jeep with a Hummer, I should say, with a gun mounted on it. Nothing particularly special here about this one, and you know, once again, it's one of these ones that I'm not entirely sure will see the light of day. It might. I might be completely wrong here with balancing and whatnot, but this could never be used, potentially. Moving on to our tank division of the Japanese. Now keep in mind, the Japanese are a landlocked nation. They actually have an obsession with American cartoons. This is totally true. Japanese had a huge obsession with American cartoons. And that's where manga and anime came from, was just this obsession. So a lot of the decals for the Japanese are actually going to be popular American cartoon characters from like Hanna-Barbera, because they love that stuff. Now this is the Kyu Maru Shiki, which is going to be one of the you know, main battle tank types, a heavy tank for the Japanese. And it's got, you know, a main gun, which needs to get in range, and it also has a Browning. One thing it is missing is rockets, so it's not going to be able to snipe or anything. This is a unit that has to be pretty much used in a push. The gun does have a 2275 range, which is excellent. It's going to be able to pick off a lot of the cheaper tanks. But in terms of like tank jousting, in which both sides are kind of firing off rockets and resupplying, this is not going to be a guy for that. He's not going to be able to stand up to other battle tanks unless he's pushing. But, you know, it's a very cool design. It's got a little wrapping around here to probably cool down this gun, or maybe heat it up. I've never really understood how that exactly works. Maybe it's supposed to keep it warm in the cold. I'm guessing this is the exhaust system, and that if you're an infantry unit behind this, you're gonna have a bad day. 4 antenna along this guy. It's not radar guided, obviously, because... oh, sorry, 2 antenna behind him. And, you know, hopefully that gives him some advantages, but I assume it's just aesthetic. 20 front armor makes this guy kind of a beast on the battlefield. And, you know, he does do pretty good damage. He does have really good stabilizers, so this might be an actual main battle tank in the game. Specifically for people choosing to play as the Blue Dragons, which I assume will be very popular because their naval units are great. And this is a small 10-point tank here for the Japanese, the M41A1. I would call this great, even though it's a crappy tank. It's great because it compares very well with the T-34. It's within the proper time frame, and so you're going to be able to produce a ridiculous number of these things and do very well with them at that, just like the T-34 was. It's a unit that's supposed to soak damage, get killed. It's supposed to kill infantry, kill vehicles. It's supposed to be spread around the battlefield for cheap in order to effectively maintain dominance. It's not a tank that stands up to other tanks that we know. It basically bounces off of them with this really crappy main gun. But for 10 points, this is a very good value for one of these really, really low ball, high supply tanks. Moving forward, we have the Nanayan Shiki A, which has double Japanese flags on it, which makes it double Japanese patriotic. It has, once again, another main gun and a Browning on top. No gunner in there just yet. Note range is just slightly lower from the Shiki. Yes, by about 100. Which will make this kind of a pretty good, you know, small tank. It's definitely better in terms of small tanks than the M4, but the big difference is that you won't be able to trade these guys by just losing them all, you know, so if you don't get stuff. This is a guy that's going to be picking off vehicles, infantry, anti-air units, sneaking around. It's relatively low risk, much lower than the Shiki, which is 160. And this one has a lot of variants. This is the Nanayan Shiki C, which is, you know, basically once again the same thing, slightly higher quality gun, slightly more AP, it appears, is the word of the day. And, yeah, that's actually the only difference. Literally 3 damage per shot extra. How does that matter? Well, let's say you have 10 front armor on your tank. You fire it with this gun. It has 10 AP. This gun on the Nanayan Shiki now only does 1 damage. This one, however, does 3 damage because 13 minus 10. I can't believe you said 13. 13 minus 10 is 3. So that's a pretty big difference in terms for a 5-point difference. You're literally tripling your damage output on heavy tanks by choosing to go for this one over this one. I know, crazy. Now here's the Nanayan Shiki E, which once again is going to be slightly better in other ways. Looks like the AP is roughly the same. And yes, it's actually going to be the accuracy and the range that's going to go up, which means the stabilizer's also going up. Dear God, so for 15 more points you get higher accuracy, 1,000 more meters range, and it actually puts it into category with this Nanasan Shiki in terms of range. So this could be a good combination with the Nanasan Shiki for rushes. Now we have the Nanayan Shiki, which has frag grenades, which means this thing's going to be an absolute infantry slayer, and will be able to provide support when trying to capture towns, if in fact you try to capture towns. It's got the frag rounds on the top here. It's got 80 in supply. That's a crazy amount, actually. And, you know, it's 8 armor, so it's on the higher scale of armors. There are 16 and 17 armor vehicles out there, but this, as far as the medium tanks go, that's pretty damn high. And it's got a pretty plain design. It's got green and brown camo, so nothing too crazy here. But yeah, it's it might be too niche to actually get used now I think about this, because usually to kill infantry you bring infantry, you don't bring infantry killing tank, and usually you want to bring units that will, because of deck limitations being what they are, you want to bring units that will kill a lot of stuff and not just one thing. Unless it's super highly specialized, which in case this is not super highly specialized because it also has a vehicle slaying gun that can also deal with AA and some light tanks. Oh look, it's the Roku Ichi Shiki. Roku Ichi Shiki. So this is a 10-point tank, you know, very similar in style to this bad boy over here. A slightly better gun though, makes it able to actually do a little bit more damage to tanks. Now keep in mind, it only has 8 AP power, so it's going to be pretty good against lightly armored tanks and medium range tanks, but will not be that much better against the heavy bad boys. So it's a pretty cool design. It's got these weird little phalanges on the side here, which I'm assuming don't actually do anything. Looks like they should do something, but they don't appear to do anything. It's a nice little mounted gun on the top here, and we have a very long cannon here, which has a hole on it for the rounds to come out. This is going to be pretty heavily camoed, but once again, it's a real cheap tank, 10 points. It could see the light of day, once again, because there are people who enjoy making those free, or category C spam decks, and this would fit right into that category of spam deck. Look at all these A's here. Do you think this is just a template? This is actually supposed to be like a AAA anti-air unit or something? It would be weird if it was. I mean, how is this supposed to do area of effect splash damage in the air? That's ridiculous. So those are the tanks. We'll move on to the recon units now. So here's our JSDF Ranger Squad, which with their American training will dominate the field. Now, they do have very good optics and very good stealth, which means they're going to be able to spot very well without being spotted themselves. They do have these law, so they will be able to pick off things like command vehicles, but they will have a lot of trouble with the brand new command infantry, which is worthwhile noting. There's two ways of deploying this infantry squad. We have our normal Box 10 and our UH-1H with our Japanese insignia on the side here. This is, yes, Mitsubishi's motors. Now, don't judge it too hard, because Mitsubishi probably has a contract with the Army to make these, and this is probably the specific spec that they want. So, I mean, Mitsubishi, badass car maker, but pretty lackluster in the Jeep department. All military spec, it's got a gun on it, 30 points, you know, it's got a wheel on the back as a spare, and it's got one driver. I'm assuming they're going to animate a dude to be holding this gun eventually. You know, it's not particularly great, but it does have very good and medium stealth, so it's going to be better than some, I suppose. Compared to, like, say, this tank recon, which has good optics and medium stealth. The use of this vehicle is very different. Generally speaking, with these tank recons, you're using them in the woods to kind of just sneak around and pick off things, you know, but you'd rather have one with an anti-infantry gun on it as well. They're very odd and unusual. I don't see this ever getting used. It's a sad truth, but it's true. It's really nicely crafted, very nicely hand-modeled, but this is a vehicle that they probably could have done without in the game. Because honestly, I just don't see anyone using this other than, you know, nostalgia people, or people doing Japan-only decks, or doing reenactments, or... It'll have a really weird niche use, I absolutely think. So here's our OH-60. Or, sorry, OH-6D. That is definitely a D, not a 0. And it has rocket pod on it. And it's a 35-point recon. It has very good optics, which makes this actually a very good choice in the sky. Because 35 points is insanely cheap for helicopter recons. Now on the downside, we have a strength of 4, which means it's going to get one shot by any anti-air weaponry. But at 35 points, you can almost deploy this just for the rocket pods, because that's cheap. So here's a really weird one. This one's called the OH-1 Ninja, and this one is actually an anti-air helicopter that is also a recon. And it just doesn't have good, it's exceptional. You're paying 90, you know, I was about to say pounds, but 90 points for this bad boy. Highly unusual, because in a particular helicopter rush, you could potentially have this sitting in the back, just nuking away the enemy's helicopters while spotting for it. Once again, very niche role, but the niche that it fits in the current metagame of Wargame Air-Land Battle makes it so that you'd actually use this. The downside is that this is Wargame Red Dragon, nothing is balanced yet, and we might be living in a world of artillery. It's hard to say right now. In our vehicle section, we don't have too many Japanese vehicles compared to a lot. Now we do have this Box 10, which is an infantry character, as well as the Chugatu, which carries the command infantry, and only the command infantry. Here's our Hachi Kyu Shiki, which, you know, only deploys one type of infantry as far as I know. I'm pretty sure this is not available otherwise. And it's got the ATGMs, so it's going to be a pretty heavily armored troop transport for that one troop. Here's a Mitsubishi rocket. Yes, it's the Mitsubishi 106mm. I bet you didn't know Mitsubishi made guns. Oh, God. Now, the range on this is not particularly good. It's actually outranged by most tanks. So this is going to be kind of a flanking type rocket, which don't actually get used that much because there's not a lot of opportunities for that. Now we get into our first Sacklow's rocket. Once again, mounted to a Jeep, and it kind of looks like a bicycle type, you know? Maybe people don't know what I'm talking about. It feels like a bicycle of Jeeps. But this one's called the Mitsubishi Mat. Has 2 Sacklow's rockets, which, you know, hopefully won't explode when they get hit. You know, it's a 5 strength, so it can take one hit from one of those, like, super light tanks, but any other tank will just destroy this in one shot. And once again, the range is basically not worthwhile for us to take, other than the fact that it's a cheap rocket, and you can, you know, get some pretty good flanks on this. And here's our first guy with, like, a decent range, 26-25. This is our Mitsubishi GU match. And, you know, it's got 45% accuracy, and 2 rockets. That's a lot of problems in one vehicle. When you have 45% accuracy and 2 shots, theoretically, only one of these go off. And that's not even statistically true. Hypothetically, only 90% of one of those will actually hit anything. Which means in the long run, when you have 10 of these, you'll only get like 9 shots off. And that's not very good. But having said that, it's 15 points. So that's always good. This is clearly a vehicle that you're going to have to, you know, expect to lose in a push. If you're expecting a push, you'll deploy this guy. But otherwise, not particularly too valuable. It does have that good 17 AP damage, which means it'll do 7 damage against those heavy tanks, which is actually a lot, by the way. The upgraded version, this is the 2-mat, the Mitsubishi 2-mat, and this one has a lot more AP, 21, which means it'll be doing devastating damage to those big bad boy tanks. And once again, just a little Mitsubishi Jeep, nothing particularly special. They've taken the back casing off, I'm assuming because they want this wheel to reticulate all the way around compared to, you know, where's the back casing one? Oh god, now these guys actually have back casing. I'm making that up. But yeah. You're obviously going to need a spotter with all these AT. None of them have particularly good optics, which is standard for how AT work in the game. So here's our Nanasan Shiki. We've seen this guy before. This is our infantry carrier. It's got a little back poop slot here where people can just plop out when they're ready to deploy. And once again, I'm assuming this is Japanese Dragon. It's not particularly well drawn, unfortunately. It's supposed to be a little spikier. It looks more like a lion. And here's our Rensu 106M for millimeter gun. Yeah, once again, you know, it's kind of a hybrid. It's got that, you know, MMG nest, so it can hit helicopters and ground, but that's not what you're going to use this for. And it's one of the ones that I don't know if we'll see the light of day. It's pretty expensive for a 1750 range rocket. You'd rather just specialize with this guy here for 10 points less. But, you know, it's the Rensu 106mm. Once again, if there are any kind of World at War type enactments, maybe this will be used just as kind of like a roleplay element. But it doesn't fit enough of a niche to really legitimize it. But we'll see. It's a crazy game. This could be the top vehicle. Who knows? In the helicopter department, we have the AH-1S. So ITOs, rocket pods, Vulcans. There's a Vulcan gun up front here. Pretty cool, actually. And you can see the rocket pod and also our missiles right here. And it's got a very, very long and thick helicopter blade here. Very sleek, cool, futuristic design. These Japanese are definitely their future tech. And what is that? Is that some sort of like you know, jet type thing here? Is that what I'm looking at? Jet on a helicopter? If that's true, that'd be crazy cool. I don't know how practical it'd be, but that'd be crazy cool. Yeah, this is gonna be, you know, a tank slayer. It has the rocket pods to stun them in place, and the Sakhalos to deal the damage. The Sakhalos deal 20 AP, which is quite high for AP, and the range on those is 26-25. So you can definitely do some jousting against certain AA units because of the range advantage. So here's our OH-6D tow. Yes, it looks very small. Yes, it looks like a traffic helicopter, but it does in fact have 4 tow rockets on it. So for 40 bucks, this is a pretty good AT option. It's got very, very good range, 26-25, and it's cheap for a helicopter. So I mean, you could plop out like 3 or 4 of these things, pick off some tanks, and you're laughing. You're laughing, unless they have anti-air units that can hit within 26-25 range. In that case, you're crying. You're crying. So here's our transport helicopter, UH-1H. We've seen this guy before. It's got the Japanese Signa here, and they'll just kind of plop out from here. Of course these guys will get used all the time. Of course. What are you going to put your command in? Definitely not a Jeep. So the Japanese Air Force is not quite as large as the South Korean ones. You've probably noticed that already. We have 2 Japanese insignias. Very cool. There's a little swords insignia here, maybe to commemorate samurai culture. And You know, we're not going to see anything like the Zero. That's World War II. But very cool design. Now, this one in particular, you know, it's got these SALH missiles. They're going to be sniping down those tanks and vehicles. But it's also got a Vulcan gun, so it can do a gun run. And it also has infrared, so, I mean, if it's getting close to other enemy aircraft and it has vision, of which it has exceptional air detection, it can actually get an infrared missile off. So yeah, kind of in line with other NATO bombers. So here's our F-104J Ryu, or maybe that's a Ryu. I hear a lot of people say Ryu, so maybe it's Ryu. And yeah, very slick, cool designs. They love modeling planes at UJet Systems. This one is going to be purely for air superiority fighter purposes, and it's going to be very much close range. The furthest shot this thing can do is 2,800 meters, which is about a half of a crappy radar or radar fighter, and you know, the higher quality ones are hitting at 15,000 range. So this one's coming in for the kill, and it's going to be a guy that's going to go ahead and try and dogfight. Now we have our F-15J, which is, you know, F-15 Japan. It's got SEMAC and radar missiles, which means that it's going to be able to do semi-high amounts of damage. The range on this is 6,300, so it's also going to have to come into close range to get some of these loads off. But once it's able to actually come into close range, it will do some pretty crazy damage. So if you can have a guy use Category C planes, and then bring this bad boy in after him, this plane will kill all other planes. It is the plane to end all their planes. Very slick aerodynamic design. Look at those rockets hanging off here. Oh, so sexy. Just don't get shot down, because you're a 165-point plane. So this is the F-4EJ. Sexiest plane in the game? Yes. Yes, it is. And on the back here's a decal. And this is the lion-looking dragon that I was talking about. And I was mentioning before how it has to be a little bit pointier, and this one just has that. It has the whiskers that are so notorious in that Japanese dragon. And it's very well designed, very slick looking decal. I wish they just paste this on everything, but maybe this yellow doesn't fit, and the white is what they were forced with. Now this is a 100-point jet fighter, slightly worse than the F-15J. But it does have a higher potency on its payload, which is always great. It's a 100-point tank, which makes it a little more affordable than your F-15J at 165. But yeah, it's kind of a thing. Would you rather have 3 of these or 2 of the F-15Js? And it's going to be a choice. It always is. So here's our F-4EJ Kai. Yes, Kai, as in King Kai from Dragon Ball Z, the only Japanese I've been exposed to in my years. And here's a fun fact of this one. No, not Daffy Duck. Woody Woodpecker, yes. Hanna-Barbera. Like I said, the Japanese love American cartoons, and there's like this really big obsession in Japan with Woody Woodpecker. It's really unheard of. Like, yeah, Woody Woodpecker is popular around the world, but it's really popular in Japan. And nothing would piss you off more than being bombed by Woody Woodpecker. Now this guy comes with a pretty sizable payload of bombs, and these are going to be HE area of effect bombs, which means that we're going to see a cluster bomb hitting a large area. So you're paying 130 points for a cluster bomber. That's pretty damn good. Now it does have a Vulcan cannon, so it can do a little bit of a gun run on a single unit. And it also has a Sparrow, which means that, you know, if something comes into range, which is not high, 5,600, it can fire back. Now, does that ever happen? Usually never. Once again, very cool design. Loving the Woody Woodpecker decals on the side here. Very, very cool. So here's our F-86F Kyoko. That's a very hard name to pronounce. It's a funny looking little bomber, specifically because it doesn't have the aerodynamic opening that you know, other vehicles do, but that also means that the air is actually going to fly through here, potentially. I'm guessing that's how this works, and make it slightly more aerodynamic and possibly faster. Let's see, it's 750 kilometers per hour compared to 900. No, it's much slower. I was right in the first place. Not aerodynamic at all. So it is a napalm bomber, which is always good. Japanese need a napalm bomber, and this is it. We'll never see these landing wheels ever again, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's 55 points. That's a bit high for a napalm bomber, but you know, it's a napalm bomber. What are you expecting, people? So weird thing, 778, and then you go to the other side. It's inverted. I wonder if that's a mistake. Could be. Looks like it could be a mistake. Lots of bug spotting. Now the decals here, we can see the Japanese flag here. Looks like there's a little dragonite here. Very tiny dragonite. And then on the side here, we have their mark of the dragon, which signals you for death. Napalm bombers have a pretty low survivability rate in this game, actually. Just because they're usually very cheap, and they're rarely really easy to kill compared to other ones, specifically because they're going into the heat of the action. Okay, so we've seen logistics, infantry, support, tank, recon, vehicles, helicopters, air support. I guess we're done. So oh, right. One more category. This is the mother of all categories. This, people, is your Marine category. Now, like I've been saying, you get 6 free slots of Marine, so you can fit them in with a large number of units that we've already seen. And if you choose to do so, you can. But the Marine slot has 6 slots that are free, so you'll fill them up regardless. The Japanese have 2 ships that they can use here. We have the Hatsoyuki, which has our Harpoon radar missile system, as well as some Sea Sparrows for anti-air, and a naval gun that can deal with both anti-air and ground, which makes it kind of a beast. Specifically, I said Pacifically, as in Pacific Ocean, where we'll be fighting with this. Specifically, these Harpoons here have an 8750 range, which means they'll be able to snipe out smaller ships easily. They're 200-point command ships. They're absolute beasts, but yeah, great weapons. Don't let these guys die. Now here's our Congo, which is another command ship. It's 250 points, which is slightly more expensive, but we're looking at a slicker, smaller design that fits in just as many weapons and a little more firepower. Same range in weapons. You know, we have a better naval gun and a better naval SAM system, but you know, this is gonna be a beast of a ship, and the few games I played as Japan, rallying at Congos is a good idea. They're very cool looking, very awesome, very well designed. Looks like there's an escape ship here, you know, for when these inevitably do get sunk down. And there's the AT guns just on here, radar systems everywhere. It's a modern flotilla of violence. And I don't think there are 2 other new units. Are there? No. Sometimes these guys have air units in here as well, but no, there will be none. So that's actually the full-on Japanese deck. Thank you guys for watching, and you know, actually up next will be the packed side of things, which will be Russia, East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the CCCP, China, and North Korea. See you guys then.